Hi everyone, Dave here. I hope you're all doing well. Now we've been pretty much blessed with goalkeepers, both at Chesterfield Football Club and on the podcast. Already had Bob Wilson, Steve Ogrizovic and Chris Marples on. And with our latest guest, we fill in the last 2 decades so that we've got a good look at goalkeeping kind of from the 1960s onwards at Chesterfield. Our latest guest is the incredible Tommy Lee. Now Tommy was with us for a good 10 years, in which time he won the league title with both John Sheridan and Paul Cook, and ever present in both of those seasons. And we also had cup wins as well. It was good to have a chat with him about the people that he battled the number 1 slot with, who he thought there was the real underrated goalkeepers that he played with at Chesterfield, and also Ollie Soderberg. And it was also good to have a chat about all things Saltergate and B2Net and that whole move, and obviously what his sandwich of choice was at Linda's Sandwich Shop, which was a rather shocking answer, I must say. As always, we are at Spire Legends on Twitter and Legends of the Spire on Facebook. Do get in touch if there's anyone you'd like to see, and if you like, comment, subscribe, rate, whatever it is on whatever podcast platform you listen on, that would be super too. So here we are with the latest episode of Legends of the Spire with Tommy Lee.
Legends of the Spire.
If we go to the start of your career, you were at what, Outquith Juniors, was it?
Yeah. So I started playing football with my brothers. I've got 3 brothers, and then you get into a little bit of grassroots. And my dad was the manager of the team, along with my best friend's dad, and I suppose that's where it started. Didn't start out as a goalkeeper. I used to play outfield quite a little bit. And as things transpired, I ended up in goal. I love Man United, love Peter Schmeichel. My dad was a goalkeeper, so it sort of made sense. And I just enjoyed diving around a little bit and getting dirty and try to copy Peter Schmeichel. So I suppose that's where, Outquith Juniors and my love of Peter Schmeichel and Man United, really.
So you moved into net out of choice. You weren't put there.
Yeah, partly. I mean, I used to fall out quite a bit with my dad on the touchline. And I think it was sort of the case of, well, if you're going to argue with me on the touchline, I'll stick you in net. So then we don't fall out with each other as much, obviously in a friendly way. And yeah, that's how it started.
And I wondered, because I mean, for years, you might not be aware, but for years everyone's kind of quibbled over your height. How tall are you?
Well, I'm 6'1". So yeah, the Wikipedia page is right. I'm about 6'1", I'd say, on my tiptoes.
That was one of my key questions. So there you go. That's one answered. Because it's kind of funny, isn't it, with goalkeepers? You do get them. I suppose nowadays goalkeepers start off at like 6'4" upwards, don't they? They're all massive nowadays.
Yeah, I think it is changing slightly. I think the average height of the Premier League goalkeeper has come down slightly. And I think that's probably thanks to the likes of Iker Casillas, more recently, David Raya, who plays at Brentford. I think Ederson, Joe Hart are around 6'2", 6'3", De Gea's 6'2", 6'3", Kasper Schmeichel similar. So I think the position has changed slightly in the profile. I think distribution and how a goalkeeper is with the ball at his feet is as important now as the height. I mean, the question I get asked now as a coach is, number 1, how tall is he? But then number 2, what's he like with the ball at his feet? So I think there has been a shift slightly, but it is still a massive asset for a goalkeeper. I wish I could have been 2 inches taller. I suppose I might have had a not a better career, but I might have played at a higher level if I was a little bit taller.
Yeah. Well, I'm 6'5" and I don't fit on trains. I don't fit on planes. So you're doing all right. I won't worry. And then you ended up at Man United, didn't you? So it was 2002, was it?
Yes. Yeah. So I played with my county team. So I played with Bradford Boys, and that's where I was scouted by Manchester United. They approached my dad. They watched a couple of games, and being a Man United fan, it was like wow, Man United. And I had a couple of trials, and I think I was 12 when I signed registration forms within the academy, and I was lucky enough to be there for almost 9 years.
Are your family Manchester United fans though? They're not, are they?
Yeah, we
are.
all are. Yeah, my dad was a Man U fan, and I mean, my memories from my childhood are pretty much watching Man United VHSs in the morning in school holidays, and then down in the field with my brothers, try to emulate what we'd seen. So we had the first title winning VHS, and then obviously they won the league through the 90s, and then the treble video we used to watch religiously. And yeah, massive Man United fans, and we still are.
And you got the quadruple, what, 2005 was it?
Yeah, I mean, I was injured quite a lot of that. I broke my wrist at 17, fractured my scaphoid, and that was probably an 18-month injury. So I played in that season. I maybe played 10 games. I was sharing game time with Tom Heaton at the time and Luke Steele, and I think Ben Foster might have played a few games. So there was a lot of competition. So we did win the quadruple, but I did play a massive part in much of that season.
And you did a good article that I read about how many painkillers you took throughout your career, like thousands, wasn't it, through various injuries?
Yeah.
And I spoke to Drew Talbot, who was pretty much the same. You know, the amount of stuff that he had to put up with when he retired and stuff was just incredible, really. You kind of did have that throughout your career, didn't you?
Yeah, so I had a non-union of a scaphoid fracture in my wrist. I mean, it's still fractured today. And quite early on in that injury, the specialist sat me down probably as an 18-year-old and said, listen, the injury you've got isn't going to heal. We've done everything we can. So it's a case of you find another career or you just put up with the pain. And the one thing that helped me with the pain at the time was diclofenac. It's an anti-inflammatory. It's widely prescribed, and I took it, and I got used to taking it, and it did the job. It numbed the pain a little bit, and you know the science at the time probably wasn't as well known with non-steroidal anti-inflammatories and the damage it can do. But I was taking 3-4 a day at Man United. Then after I left, just to get me through games, and it was just a norm. I wasn't alone in that. A lot of players needed to take those sort of drugs, if you like, to get through training and get through games. And you know, I got to a point, probably early 20s, where they stopped working a little bit, so I was in quite a lot of pain. And I got some good advice off a doctor at the time who said, your body's probably forgotten how to use its own anti-inflammatory mechanisms, if you like. So I stopped taking them a little bit, and I reined it back in. And fortunately enough, I got to a point in my career where I could get away with taking maybe 1-2 a week, and that did the job. But yeah, I mean, it was a difficult time, you know, being young goalkeeper. Obviously, your hands are massively important in that, and every time you're making a save, you're getting pain, and it was difficult, but I managed to get through it, and I'm glad I did.
And then you end up with a move to Macclesfield, and obviously everyone knows you from Macclesfield from playing against Chelsea, of which, I mean, an eventful game for you. You kind of got injured making a save from Solomon Kalou, didn't you? And then you got sent off.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, do you know what? It was a really good experience. The first time I played in front of that many people, I think it was a full house. It was Mourinho. He played all the big names. We were bottom of the league pyramid, if you like, at Macclesfield. Paulins came as manager. We were struggling at the time, and they were top. They were champions. And for 46 minutes, it was the best day ever. We were 1-1 at half time, I think it was. We'd done all right, and then it was Shevchenko. Obviously, he's knocked the ball around me. I've come flying out, and I pulled my arms away. I thought, I'm in trouble here, and he's dragged his knee. It connected with my head, and I remember it. I was a little bit dazed, and I remember the referee, Lee Mason, at the time, when he was on the floor, just crouched down and went, when you get on your feet, I'm going to send you off. And I thought, brilliant. So I'm laid there, knowing we didn't have a keeper on the bench, I stood up, got sent off, and our centre back Dave Morley ended up going in net, and we got beat 7 or 6-1, I think it was. And the Sun gave him a 10 out of 10 the next day in the paper. So all the lads stuck that on the dressing room wall, like, oh, outfield player 10 out of 10. But that's football. It was a great experience at the time, and probably was the first time in my career where I actually thought, yeah, this is what I want to do, like playing in front of that many people. And although it didn't turn out brilliant that day, it was a great experience and something I'm lucky to have probably had at that time.
Not happy at the moment though if they concede another one here. Shevchenko just into the feet of Wright Phillips. He's done really well, and Shevchenko's in here. He's round the keeper. It has to be a penalty. Oh, it is a red card. We're just about ready. There's Lee Mason's whistle. Here's Frank Lampard. Oh, I tell you what, David Morley nearly got to that one.
Do you keep in touch with Danny Whitaker now? Because obviously he's manager of a kind of a resurgent Macclesfield, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I'm friends with Danny on Facebook. I've probably not spoken to him for a while, but I mean, we had a car school when he signed for Chesterfield. So there was me, Danny Whitaker, Mark Hallett, Danny Hall, Phil Pickin, Paul Isley, Martin Gritton, and I mean, they were some of my best times at Chesterfield with those guys, and the little bit of success we had under John Sheridan. So I'm pleased for Danny Whitaker. It's no surprise to me that he has gone down the management route, because he was very talented as a player, but he knew the game as well, and you could see that pretty much straight from the off.
And then we'll whiz back onto Chesterfield in a moment, because there's obviously loads of Chesterfield. But you had a little loan spell at Rochdale, didn't you? But that ended like in a playoff final, which is bonkers, because you joined there in like March, didn't you? And then ended up in the playoff final.
Yeah, I broke my hand playing for Macclesfield earlier on in the season, and I opted to have the operation, so I was out of the team. And then Ian Brightwell got the sack, or Paul Ince might have left, gone to MK Dons, and Keith Alexander came in, and he pretty much said, "You're not part of my plans at the moment, so you're going to be on the bench." And I got contacted by Keith Hill at the time, who knew a friend of mine, and he said I was out of the team, would I like to come? And Rochdale were near the top, so I joined in March, and I think we only lost one game. We got into the playoffs, and then unfortunately got beaten in the final. But that was like such a unexpected but great opportunity for me to go there and play a few games, and ended up at Wembley. And then I got released by Macclesfield at the end of that, which was, I found quite strange at the time, because I thought I'd done so well at Rochdale, and Keith Alexander run me and told me, unfortunately, not part of my plans. And he did that on the eve of the playoff final, which I thought was a bit strange. But when I look back now, it turned out quite well.
Yeah, fate kind of threw you in our direction. I remember at the time, I'll be completely honest, I remember at the time thinking, oh, we've got a keeper on trial that was released from Macclesfield. Because we were looking at the time, was a replacement for Barry Roach, who had had a bit of unfair stick from the Chesterfield fans, and had kind of quite rightly given it back, and he ended up leaving. Then you came in on trial, didn't you?
I came in on trial originally. I had 2 weeks, and at the end of the 2 weeks, Lee Richardson sort of said, "We've not really got any budget, can't really sign you." So that was it, fair enough. Off I went. And then maybe a week later, I got a phone call off Lee Richardson asking if I wanted to play in a game against Sheffield Wednesday. He said, "The situation's the same, we can't really sign you, but it's an opportunity for you to have a game." And I played quite well in the game. Made a couple of saves early on, caught a couple of crosses. And then I remember it clear as day, the second half, I came flying out of my goal for a through ball, and I missed the ball completely. And it was Sodji at the time. His brother played for Bury, famously. He used to wear the bandana. Yeah. And I remember I missed the ball completely, and he's got pretty much an open net at Saltergate. And I remember looking behind me, and he put it over the bar. And I look back now and think, without question, if he'd have hit the back of the net, that would have been my short time at Chesterfield, done, like absolutely done. But fortunately for me, he missed it, and I remember the Chesterfield fans singing during the game, "Rico, sign him up." So that sort of forced his hand a little bit, and I think through gritted teeth, he offered me a contract, and I wasn't in a position to turn it down.
Yeah.
So that's how my Chesterfield journey started, I suppose.
Yeah.
Bournemouth's 5-match unbeaten run bit the dust at Saltergate, where Jack Lester's 15th goal of the season clinched victory for Chesterfield. But not without a big scare. Jamie Lowry's mistake as the match moved into the final 20 minutes gave the Cherries a golden chance to salvage something. But Tommy Lee saved a penalty in the last home game and repeated the trick against Alan Connell.
I've spoken to quite a few players from that era, like Alan O'Hare, Jamie Winter, Aaron Downs, people like that. And it's interesting their thoughts on Lee Richardson, because he seemed to kind of psychologically destroy a few players. Other players seem to quite like him, and some players seem to be quite tormented by him in some ways. Yeah. Did you quite like him? What was your experience with him?
I quite liked him. I mean, I was young at the time. I was a young player, and he gave me a lifeline. So I'll be forever grateful to Lee Richardson for that. But he was massively into the psychological side of the game. And I don't think, for me and for certain players, they bought into it, which I think is really important on that sort of, with that sort of stuff. But if I remember rightly, his knowledge of the game was excellent, and I think he was probably a little bit unlucky with certain signings that didn't quite work out at the time. But like I say, my opinion on Lee Richardson is I will be grateful forever for giving me that little bit of a lifeline, because I mean, I was out of the game. I was Googling jobs at the post office. I was looking at university degrees that I might do. You know, I'd done quite well at Rochdale, got to a playoff final, and then there was no offers. So yeah, I'll be forever grateful for him giving me that opportunity.
Yeah, you're leveling it up kind of 50-50 now, so it's interesting.
Yeah.
And obviously that squad was, I mean, it's such a shame that in those 2 seasons, like around then, it was kind of just missing out on the playoffs, because the firepower up front was immense, obviously, with Leicester coming in and Jamie Ward and people like that, and you had the obviously combo Niven Allett in midfield and some good defence as well. What was the missing thing that just didn't get there?
Yeah, it's a great question, because we weren't far off. It's that intangible, I suppose, sometimes, where you look at the squad and you think, well, why aren't we doing what we could potentially do? And I think the following season, and then obviously the season after, the new season, probably points to the manager a little bit. In John Sheridan, he came in and he just did something a little bit different, and maybe brought a togetherness that we hadn't had, which, and obviously with a few additions to the squad you mentioned there. But I would say a little bit of luck as well. I think Shez probably dropped on a group of players who were very good, and the couple of players who we knew we needed to get rid of, and he replaced those players, and then the feel-good factor around the new stadium. So I think that era at Saltergate, we weren't far off, but I think it just needed that little tweak in terms of a bit of togetherness and a little bit of fresh blood in there, if you like. And I think that's what Shez did brilliantly in his season at Saltergate, where we just missed out again. But then in the new season at the Pro Act.
Yeah. And one key question I always ask anyone that was from Saltergate era Chesterfield is what your order was from Linda's Sandwich Shop.
Well, I wasn't keen, to be honest, and I know that's sacrilege around there, but a lot of the lads used to go for an omelette sandwich, which I just thought was bizarre. But listen, she did all right from a lot of the lads at the bottom of the street. But if I dare say it, I wasn't too keen. I'm in trouble now.
You are. Crikey, if,
Yeah.
I ever get Linda on. Crikey.
Yeah.
And a word as well for Kevin Austin. Like when we had Jamie Winter on, he spoke really well about big Kevin Austin, who sadly passed away a few years ago. But like he was great, wasn't he? He was proper character in defence.
Yeah, I mean, obviously horrendous what happened to Kev, but I think he was a massive part of that squad at the time, and we used to have. I'll whisper it, but we used to have a little bit of a drinking school, if you like, and one Tuesday a month we used to go out and, we'd sit there with Kev and Downsy and Dell, and that was a massive part of the success we had. And John Sheridan used to insist on us doing that. And without that, I mean, Kev was a lot older than me. Paige was a lot older than me. Without having that, I would have never felt comfortable around those guys. And a lot of the younger players wouldn't. But because we had that, maybe a couple of Tuesdays every month or one every 2 months, we'd go out and we'd have a drink. And it fostered that togetherness where I felt comfortable with Robert Page, who I'd watched in the Premier League, and Kev Austin, who was probably 10 years older than me. It just created a togetherness amongst the squad, and I think that showed going forward as we moved to a new stadium that we were a good team. There were a lot of talent, but we'd fight for each other, and that was a massive part of that. And Kev was a massive part of that as well.
Yeah, and that first season as well. I mean, it was. I think you were like young player of the season or something that year, but you had a bit of a incident, didn't you, near the start when you broke your jaw?
Yeah.
You probably know what I want to ask, but there's always been the rumour. There was always the rumour that they said it was Phil Picken, but you were really good. Like he was at your testimonial, and I don't know.
We have laughed about that. Like, all I'll say is he might have been the reason I broke my jaw, but he didn't break my jaw. If that makes any sense.
I see. So there's some truth and rumour somewhere. That's fine. We can leave it there.
From what I can remember, but listen. Phil Picken didn't break my jaw. Me and Phil go back to his Man United days. I'm still great friends with him now. But yeah, we might have got ourselves in a little situation, and I paid the price.
I see. Well, thanks for shedding some light on that. It was when you had your testimonial, everyone was like, "Oh, Phil Picken's there." So that's everyone was quite pleased, I think, when they saw he was there.
Yeah, it's strange. I'm curious to know where that rumour ever came from, actually, because anyone you'd speak to, like me and Phil, great mates. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you're the car school, aren't you? So you
exactly, yeah.
And then you had the comeback game in the Droylsden Part 3, I think it was. Yeah. I mean, that was crackers. That was the match that the floodlights were turned off, wasn't it? When we were winning.
Yeah, 2-0 up, 70 minutes. So obviously the first game called off because of fog, half time. Second game, Jack chipped the keeper when he was meant to be passing the ball back to the keeper, we ended up drawing. Third game, we're 2-0 up. Floodlights go out, and it's almost like we knew it was going to happen. And then fourth game, we get beat 2-0, and then the player who scored both goals was ineligible to play, so we ended up going through. But that was it was almost funny at the end between the lads all playing Droylsden again. But yeah, that was an epic.
I always talk to anyone that I speak to from that season just because it was so strange. And like Dave Pace, who was like their manager and owner, and I'm surprised he wasn't playing as well. It was really interesting when we've had players that have played at the last game at Saltergate and the first game at what was then B2 Net.
Yeah, the B2 Net, yeah.
Yeah, what was that like? What was that difference like going from one to the other? It must have been crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the last game. I thought the last game was probably the first time in my 2 years at Chesterfield where I realised actually this is quite a big football club. And there was a lot of passion for the place, which was there when in previous games, but it wasn't in the numbers we saw in the last game, and that was my own realization of actually this is a big football club, relatively speaking. And I remember after the last game of that season, John Sheridan sat us down and said, "Listen, we need to deliver next season because there's been big investment. We're moving to a new stadium, and there's some pressure on you lads now to deliver for these fans. And if you deliver from the first game, this stadium will be full." And it turned out to be that case. I mean, I think we had 7,000-8,000 every week at home, and we had the players to entertain, and we had a, in terms of attacking football, that was probably the best Chesterfield team I played in. Craig Davis, Jack Lester, Dean Smalley, Danny Whitaker. I think he got 13 goals in the first game in the first season at the B2 Net. So he was right. We put on some good performances, and we were supported unbelievably well in that first season and going forward at the stadium.
Yeah, and as a goalkeeper in that promotion-winning season, obviously we had two fullbacks in like Scott Griffiths, Jack Hunt, who were just forward all the time. You have Dwayne Mattis, who had been kind of put into defence, was kind of a midfielder in defence. So it was a very attacking team, wasn't it? Right from the back. Is that kind of what you like as a goalkeeper? A team that's got the ball and is up the pitch away from you?
I just enjoyed winning games, and that season, I think after maybe 10 or 11 games, we just had that feeling in the squad that whoever we played, we were going to win. And that's a rare feeling in football, and it's probably happened to me only twice in my career, Paul Cook and the John Sheridan team. And that was, for me, we used to win 3-2, 4-2, 5-1. We drew 5-5 with Crewe. And for me, it did. I think I kept probably 13 clean sheets that season. But I wasn't bothered. I wanted a trophy. I wanted to get promotion, and we had the attacking firepower to just blow teams out of the water. But we won some important games that season as well, where we did knuckle down. I think we beat Stevenage at home 1-0. We beat Gillingham away 2-0, and we had some really good defensive displays as well in such an attacking team.
Yet more Derbyshire drama. No repeat of last week's 10-goal feast, but the B2 Net's biggest crowd of the season still got their money's worth. And when Jack Lester went down, Danny Whitaker scored from the spot for the fourth time this season to give Chesterfield the lead. Hard on Southend, whose performance was described as fantastic by manager Paul Sturrock. Their efforts rewarded 9 minutes before the break when Anthony Grant placed home their equaliser. The first half dominance continued into the second. Louis Saws denied by the post and then by Spireites keeper Tommy Lee. Josh Simpson also failed when it mattered. But a nailed-on point soon turned to nothing when 3 minutes into stoppage time, super sub Scott Bowden rammed in Chesterfield's winner to put the Spireites within a point of top spot.
And in both that Sheridan and Cook teams, you played every game, didn't you, of the championship winning seasons, both those seasons, and got in the PFA team, I think, in both those seasons as well. So it kind of shows you how important a good goalkeeper is as like that last line of defence in.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a lot of luck involved in that as well, but I made a personal decision quite early on in my career that any opportunity to play a game I'm going to play. So I used to play in all the JPT games when I was fit. I wanted to play in all the cup games. If Shares or Paul Cook give me the opportunity to maybe have a little breather, I didn't want it because I wanted to play every game. And I think when you're doing okay, especially as a goalkeeper, you just keep that train rolling. You want to play constantly because physically it's not as demanding as the outfield positions. And I always felt I don't want to give anyone else an opportunity. I got to a point where I thought, well, that's my shirt now, and I'm not going to let anyone else take that away from me if I've got a choice. So that was sort of a decision I made, and to get in the PFA teams of the year is probably in terms of personal achievements, the best, because that's voted for by the people you play against. So I always, I've got the 2 trophies there on the cabinet in the side in there, and I always, when I walk past, I think now and again I'll have a look and think, yeah, I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah. And was there any, obviously, whenever you ended up getting those accolades like that, the first thing the fans do is worry that you're gonna leave. And there was like throughout the time there was kind of you and Jack Lester and a few others where you'd kind of get to the transfer window open and you think, oh no, they might go somewhere else. Was there ever any chance or likelihood of that happening, or were you quite happy that you were playing and in a successful team and a place you were settled?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you want to play at as high a level as possible, but I never had an agent in my professional career. That was a decision I made, and so there was no one other than people saying, oh, Tommy's doing well at Chesterfield. There was no one actively going to clubs and saying his contract's up at the end of the season, or he's only got a year left in his contract, or would you take him? And so in a sense, I was happy to sign contracts at Chesterfield because I loved the place. I was playing football every week. Financially, I believe I was paid what I deserved. So I was never thinking, oh, I want to earn more money. But I always played under the expectation that if I am good enough to play in the Championship or the Premier League, someone will come and buy me anyway. Now, that might be naive, but when I look back, I've got no regrets about signing the contract at Chesterfield, because that's where I achieved more than I could have hoped for when I left Man United and I got released by Macclesfield. So as far as concrete chances to leave, you'd have to ask the club or the people in charge at the time. No one ever contacted me, and I had no real desire to knock on a manager's door and say, I want to leave. I just wanted to play football, and I think playing football at a place where you're appreciated is a wonderful thing, and I'm fortunate enough to have had that for a few years at Chesterfield.
Yeah, and it must be really nice to stay somewhere for so long that you do get that kind of legendary status, and you're kind of there in the history books. It must be really nice. You can travel around, you could do 20 different clubs, couldn't you, and not really be remembered anywhere, but you'll obviously have that iconic status at Chesterfield, which is lovely, isn't it? Yeah,
it is lovely, and that was never the plan. But now to reflect back and think, yeah, that is a nice thing. And I could have gone to Burnley and sat on a bench in the Championship and earned a little bit more money and played 10 games. And I could have gone to a Hull and done the same. And my career might have taken a different path, but I can look back on the games that I did play, and I probably played a full career. I retired early, unfortunately through injury, but I played over 400 games in my career. Now, if I'd have left Chesterfield and sat on a bench, and I might have had a Range Rover sat on the drive, and my house might be a little bit bigger, but I played at Wembley twice. I've got 2 league-winning medals. I've got some brilliant memories from my time at Chesterfield, and it might not pay the bills, but it's quite nice to reflect back and think, do you know what? That I'm proud of what we achieved at Chesterfield, and not many players can look back on the career and say that. So I'm fortunate in that sense.
And you mentioned like the Wembley. You obviously had the JPT final in 2012, which was a fun day out, and it was a bit of a rubbish season in many ways. And I've spoken to players before from that season where they said, we kind of went into that new season, not players left like Craig Davis and Dean Smalling, who didn't really strengthen, and kind of, I think you got injured that season, didn't you, against Bury? And it was just kind of a bit of bad luck, maybe, and a bit of wrong decisions from up at the top level, maybe. But we came out of that with a Wembley win, which was nice.
Yeah, and absolutely, it was a poor season. Ended up in relegation, and that took the shine off the Wembley win at the time a little bit. But now, when I look back, probably one of my proudest achievements at Chesterfield, playing at Wembley, winning at Wembley, keeping the clean sheet at Wembley, and now again I look back and the relegation was disappointing. but we got promoted again 2 seasons later. So, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it worked out quite well. And to win at Wembley, albeit in a lower tier competition, if you like, it's still something now. I think, wow, that was some day out.
And I've spoken to lots of players that talk about everything seeming bigger at Wembley, almost like pitch seems bigger and saps the energy out of you. As a goalkeeper, do the nets feel bigger or anything like that?
Well, yeah, they do, because I don't know if you noticed, but the netting goes back quite a long way. And I obviously I played there in the playoff final for Rochdale, and that was the first thing I noticed was, wow, yeah, these nets do seem quite big. And that game for Rochdale taught me so much, because I never thought I'd get back, and I felt like I let that day pass me by a little bit. I was wrapped up in not making a mistake, and don't be the one who costs us getting into the league up. And I remember after that game sitting down and thinking, you didn't do yourself justice there today. You didn't enjoy the day. You got caught up in it. So I made a decision at the time that if I ever get back there, I'm just going to enjoy myself, because it might never come around. And I remember that. I remember going out on the pitch and the warm up and the Chesterfield fans clapping me, and I just felt like, do you know what? I'm just going to enjoy myself today, and whatever happens, happens. And it just frees you up. And I didn't have much to do in the game, but I felt so confident in what I had to do. And again, a massive lesson in my career of sometimes you've just got to understand that it's just entertainment. Yeah. At the end of the day, you just try to entertain people. That's all football is. And we can get caught up in it being more than it is. And I understand people's jobs are at stake and et cetera, but ultimately, people want to be entertained. And from that game, and then from then on in my career, that's what I just tried to do every time I went on the football pitch. Just enjoy yourself. Because if you enjoy yourself, chances are you're going to perform better. Chances are the team's going to perform better. Chances are the fans are going to enjoy it more. So again, although the Wembley win was fantastic, that was another good lesson for me in my career of how to approach big games and how to approach my career.
Did you find yourself saying that to other players before that match as well?
Yeah, definitely. Especially the younger lads. Enjoy it. Do not let it pass you by. Whatever happens is going to happen. Prepare, do everything you need to do, but make sure you're taking what's around you, because it might never happen again. And I think defensively, especially that day, I thought Simon Ford was unbelievable. Drew Talbot was fantastic. Nathan Smith, Josh Thompson at the back. Probably the best defensive display from a Chesterfield team I'm probably biased a little bit, but that I've been involved in. I think they didn't create much, and they were flying high in League Two, Di Canio, and we just nullified them completely. And we got the goals, which was nice.
Yeah, and you made a really good save in that match as well.
Allegedly, yeah. Allegedly. I think I didn't just touch it onto the crossbar. Yeah.
Do you have kind of? Because I know goal scorers have favourite goals and things like that. Do you have favourite saves that you've kind of think back on your career?
Yeah, there's one or two that I look back on and think, yeah, that was a good save. I made one at Brentford probably in my first season, where I tipped it over the bar. And listen, it wasn't a big game. It was early on in the season, but you always know when you made a good save when the opposition striker or player comes up to you and says, "That was a good save, wasn't it?" So there's a few. I think I made one. I made one at Wickham away where I had top hand over the crossbar. So yeah, you remember little ones. I made one at Bradford, and I suppose the one that sticks out the most for me was probably away at Gillingham in the season we played. We won the league under John Sheridan, and it was a rainy Tuesday night. We'd gone down there, and it was from Akifemwa in the second half, and the ball brought to him. I've come out and spread myself, and it's hit me on the chest and bounced away. And I think it was so important at the time, because if we'd have drawn that game 1-1, you never know how it might have gone. But I made that save, and then we won 2-0, and then the wheels keep turning. And that's one thing I say to the lads I coach now is, the best keepers have got the ability to make saves in those moments where it matters. So yeah, there's a few I remember. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I could talk all night about saves. If you want to talk, I can talk all night about saves.
Yeah, there's a few more then. And are there any certain types of saves that you liked doing best? So, liked most, like tipping it round the bar or over the crossbar? Is that something that you kind of liked?
I always felt my biggest strength as a goalkeeper was 1v1 situations. I felt like I that was where I excelled, and I always liked those saves because no one expects the keeper to save it, and I think that gets the best reaction from the crowd when the striker's clean through. Oh no, he's going to score, and then you end up making a save, and it's like, oh, we're still in the game, sort of thing. So I always like making those types of saves. Yeah.
The bad thing is, if you're a goalkeeper, is you don't get to like wheel away and celebrate in front of the fans, do you? And you do something like that, like a striker.
No, unfortunately not. But the feeling's still the same. I speak to goal scorers, and when they describe that feeling, it's exactly the same for a goalkeeper, especially when it's in one of those gilt edge moments, if you like, where you might be winning 1-0 away from home in the last 10 minutes, and you make that save, and then after the game, the manager through gritted teeth might say, "Yeah, good save." I'll whisper it, but yeah, he kept doing it there. Or the players your teammates will say, "Oh yeah, that was a good save, Tommy." And they're the moments where I think, yeah, you look back and I think, yeah, I enjoyed that.
And like you mentioned, Paul Cook. So I think it was Drew Talbot that was saying he probably had a bit more fun under John Sheridan, and Paul Cook was a bit more demanding. Was the differences in both seasons that when the Paul Cook season happened, it was, how did it differ from that Sheridan one?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think Paul Cook had to be like that. I think he had to come into a club that was in transition, and he needed to stamp his authority on the place, and he did that. And I think he did it brilliantly throughout the club, from top to bottom. I think he's probably he's managed up better than I've ever seen at a football club. He brought in players at the time you're thinking, what's he doing bringing this fella in? Rich Humphries is an example, and he won't mind me saying that. We signed Rich Humphries probably mid to late 30s, and you're thinking, where's he going with this? And the reason he brought Rich in was as an example of what a good pro looked like for the younger players. And what Paul Cook did in that season with Richie, he played the third most amount of games in that season, but also he would make the younger players shadow Richie. So Richie would come in early, be the first thing, be in the gym. The younger players had to come in when Richie came in. They'd go in the gym with Richie. So he got that balance, unbelievable, and that was probably a genius bit of recruitment, because at the time, Rich Humphries, 30, whatever he is, how was he going to help us do anything? And he was unbelievable on the pitch, but I think his impact off the pitch as well for the younger players was frightening, and that was the genius of Paul Cook, if you like. His recruitment was unbelievable, and the way he treated certain players as well was top draw. And it was probably the first time I'd seen it in my career where Gary Roberts would get told to, "Don't want to see you till Thursday, Gary. Don't want to see you," because he knew Monday, Tuesday, he liked a little bit of a moan up and I'm tight, my hamstrings are tight, blah, blah, blah. But he knew come Saturday, Gary Roberts would win you the game. And he managed that situation perfectly. Ian Everett didn't train until Thursday because he knew, don't need to. Keep him out of the way. He knows the game inside out. Wheel him out Thursday, wheel him out Friday. There'll be a mountain for me on the pitch on Saturday, and that proved to be the case. So, yeah, I think very similar in terms of man management, but Paul Cook had to be that little bit more authoritarian, if you like, because the team was in transition. The club had got a little bit fluffy, if you like. And both managers equally brilliant in those seasons, but for different reasons.
Yeah. And like I say, you played all the games in that title winning season again. Were there any games that stuck out from that season?
Good question.
Probably put them on the spot. It's been quite a while.
I think obviously the Fleetwood game, last game of the season to win the league. The Burton game away was like we executed what the manager wanted us to do to a T in a big pressure game. And again, Rich Humphrey played a massive part. Jay O'Shea played a part. Owen Doyle. Liam Cooper got injured early. Sam Hurd came on and was unbelievable. Ian Everett, Tendai Darikwa. So I look back at that Burton game again, pressure game. Southend had drawn with, might have been Fleetwood at the time, so we knew if we won that game, we'd get promoted, and the manager knew what we needed to do. I think Birmingham ended up in the playoffs, so they were a good team, and we just went there and dominated for 90 minutes, and 2-0 could have been more. Those games stand out, and there's probably one or two more that have slipped to mind at the minute, but the Burton game, the Fleetwood game, unbelievable.
Yeah, so much fun.
Pass in from Gardner. It's a yellow shirt that meets it, but then Weir gets himself in problems. Humphrey finds O'Shea, and Jay O'Shea finds the back of the net, and Chesterfield have liftoff.
The season after, when we ended up in the playoffs in League One, it was kind of a bit of a surprise, really. And I was talking to Sam Morsey, and he was saying that maybe the board had let down Paul Cook a bit in some players that he maybe wanted to sign for that League One season. So it was a real achievement, wasn't it? Just to get in playoffs in League One. It's bonkers.
Yeah, I mean, we were a striker away from the Championship without question. Everywhere else on the pitch, we were good, very good. I think we probably had the best midfield in the league that season, barring maybe Bristol City. But you look at Sammy Morsey, Jimmy Ryan, top class, like unbelievable partnership those two had, and we lost Owen Doyle early on in the season. I think if we'd have replaced, obviously we got beat by Preston in the playoffs, Jermaine Beckford would have got us to the Championship without question, and that's probably a little bit of a disappointment because we weren't far off, and it would be interesting to see where the club is now if we just had that little bit of investment when we needed it. And I honestly believe a striker, Leon Clark, for instance, or someone of that ilk would have got us to where we wanted to get to. Yeah,
absolutely. And it'd have been interesting, wouldn't it, if they'd have kept that squad together, and if Paul Cook had remained that season after. I mean, I think I remember right, the season after, it didn't really seem like a particularly strong League One the season after, and you kind of thought we could have gone up as champions in League One if they'd have just kept the team together and made a few additions. Is that kind of what the players kind of thought as well?
Yeah, but I think as soon as you lose Sam Kluker, Tendai Darikwa, I think Sammy stayed for another season. Jimmy Ryan, I think, went.
Yeah.
At the club, you start to feel like they're massive parts of what we've achieved. And although we did sign some decent players after that, you just knew that nucleus had gone. And I think Dean Saunders tried his best to keep those players, but again, I don't think there was that much desire from the club to back that, which is a shame. And I suppose that's where the decline started.
Yeah, and I wanted, because you missed the second leg of the playoffs against Preston?
Yeah.
And Murphy played, didn't he? I think it was his first game for like 2 years or something when he played. And you've played with, obviously had a lot of goalkeepers that you've been at Chesterfield with over the years. I wondered if any kind of stuck out as being the people that pushed you most during your time. I'm guessing like Rich O'Donnell was probably...
Yeah, I mean, they all did. I mean, Rich O'Donnell's distribution was unbelievable. It was miles better than mine when he came to the club. So that changed the way I approached distributing the ball. I very rarely did any extras. But when Rich came in, I thought, well, he's quite good at that, so I need to get better. So I used to come in on my day off and try and improve my kicking, which I think it did. But Alex Cairns was a very good young keeper. But the one who probably pushed me the most and sort of reignited that fire of I need to get better was probably Aaron Chapman. Because Chappie was new to goalkeeping. He came into the club, but I mean, on his day, he was unbelievable. I mean, in training, he'd make saves that I couldn't make just purely because of his size and his athleticism. So he was probably the one who, he probably hadn't gone on to do what I believed he could have done in the game, but he was probably the one that made me start taking S&C seriously and improving my sprint and becoming more explosive. And just because I didn't want to let him get anywhere near that first team. So yeah, I'm slightly disappointed that Chappie ain't gone on to do what I think he probably could have done in the game.
Yeah, definitely have massive potential, and Mark Crossley as well. Like he came in, didn't he? Was that when we were still at Saltergate? He came in, wasn't it? And because he ended up being the kind of number 2 for you, didn't he, for a season?
He played the first game.
Yeah,
he played the first game at Torquay away. I think I'd had a bit of a sticky pre-season, and the manager played Mark in the first game, and then I played the rest of the games. But Norm was brilliant for me because it was probably the first coach I'd had who understood how to get the best out of me. And straight from word go, I could see that's all he wanted to do. You know, there was no, or at least I couldn't tell, there was no ulterior motive. It was just he wanted to make me better. So we started watching clips back, which I'd never done before, and started working on specific things in training to try and make me better. And straight away I responded to that. Whether he did that on purpose or that's just the coach he was, whatever he did for me worked. So I started to improve, and I started to respect other people's opinions. You know, Mark Crossley, saved penalties, plays for Forest, had an unbelievable career, but he approached me in a way that I responded to. So it was unbelievable for me.
Yeah. And I know it's like goalkeepers union and everything, but a word for Ole Soderberg. He had a torrid time, bless him. I felt really sorry for him when he came in because it just really didn't go for him, did it, when he came in?
Yeah, and obviously I was injured at the time, and I remember having a discussion with Norm at the time. He said, "Oh, we've got a lad from Newcastle coming in. He's 6'6", and they love him, and yeah, I think he's going to be all right." And I remember after his first training session, I was in the treatment room, and Norm just came in and he sort of gave me that look like, could be in trouble here. and it turned out that way, unfortunately. But I think he went on to do all right. I think he played in Norway and did what he did. But I always felt, not in a patronising way, but I think by that stage I'd played quite a few seasons. I had a little bit of success, and I think it was always going to be a challenge for any goalkeeper to come in the short term and even in the long term, because I was judged to a different standard that the new goalkeepers were judged at. I could get away with a little bit because I built up a little bit of capital. Soon as Rich O'Donnell came in, as soon as he conceded a goal, you could hear the murmurs in the crowd. And Greg Fleming as well, as soon as he conceded a goal. And I think it was really difficult, as it is for all goalkeepers at clubs where there's been a long-standing number 1, to come in and perform, because it is, you judge to a different standard.
Yeah. I think there's probably still little echoes of that now, probably. It's probably still wearing off, even still.
Yeah, and I think as well, we're all guilty of looking through rose-tinted glasses. That the past was better than the future, and Tommy never did this, and of course I did. I made as many mistakes as any goalkeeper, but I just built up a little bit of capital because we had a little bit of success. And I think it's the same with a lot of goalkeepers. They need games. They need to play 20, 30 games, and then you can make a fair assessment of the qualities and whether they're good enough.
So we're getting to kind of tail end of your career now. So Paul Cook kind of left, and it was always going to be difficult for anyone that kind of came in afterwards. And we had kind of Dean Saunders and Danny Wilson and a few other bosses. There was a big, I've always been interested to ask you actually, because I think in that 15-16 season, I think you played pretty much every game that season, yeah. I think, virtually. And there was that last home game against Bury. Did that playing in that match kind of shorten your career a bit? Because did you get kind of an injury or play through injury that match?
No, I got injured in that game. So that's when I did my shoulder initially. So I came for a cross in the last minute, collided with Peter Clark. Innocuous, felt no pain at the time. Went to take the dead ball, and as I've struck the ball and swung my arm, my shoulder just dropped out of its socket. So obviously I'd caused an injury in the collision, but there was still no pain. So after the game, I spoke to the physio and the doctor, and they did some tests and says, "Yeah, you've got a little bit of lacticity in there, if you like, a bit of looseness, we'll send you for a scan. So I went for a scan, and the scan said, yeah, you've torn a little bit of the labrum, which is the cartilage that keeps the head of the shoulder in place, but it's minor. And obviously I wanted to play every game, which was pretty naive when I look back. And we had Bradford in the last game of the season, and the doctor said, listen, you're not going to make it any worse. It's up to you. So I played the game all right. Like, didn't really feel any pain. It was a little bit sore in the evening and whatnot, because I had a similar injury in my right shoulder. I tore the labrum in my right shoulder as well, but that was fine because I had loads of strength. Yeah, so after the season, spoke to the specialist again, and he said, listen, I can operate, or you can do a 6-week rehab protocol in the gym and try and strengthen it. So I chose the rehab in the summer, loads of weights, and followed the protocol. But I still had this feeling that when my arm went in a certain position, it was going to fall out of its socket. And because my right shoulder was knackered anyway, I thought, well, I can't really have two knackered shoulders. I'll just get this one fixed. And it turns out the damage was a lot worse than the scan showed. And after the initial operation, I got an infection in there, which nobody knew about. It wasn't getting any better. It was stiff, and I got a second opinion, and I ended up having 4 operations. But ultimately, the infection and the initial operation had caused too much damage for me to get back to where I needed to get to.
Yeah. How are they now? Do you still have problems?
Yeah, they're not great. They're manageable. I mean, the next procedure will be a replacement at some point, but I mean, listen, it is what it is. It's at the minute, it's not something I can't deal with. But yeah, they're not great.
Yeah. It's kind of a common thing. Spoke to Andy Morris, who said he struggles to walk upstairs sometimes, and other players. It's kind of common, isn't it? Do you as kind of ex-players kind of talk to each other about things like that and support each other through things like that?
Yeah, definitely. Especially, obviously I'm at Sheffield United now, and Derek Geary's the 18s coach, and obviously Jack's the academy manager, and Dell struggles with his knee. Jack struggles with his knees, but I think almost across the board, it's a small price to pay, I think, for the experiences that I had, and where it's allowed me to go in my life. Now, it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be the case, but at the minute, that's the nature of the beast, and part of the blame lies with me. I could have handled those injuries a little bit better and maybe tailored my training a little bit. And I think some of the coaching staff could have helped me do that. But football's moved on, even in the time since I've finished to now. And, player care is a lot better. Players are a lot more aware of the bodies. And, it's almost a strength now to say to a physio, I might be injured. Rather, 10 years ago, you didn't go to the physio.
Yeah.
Unless, it was seen as a weakness to say you're a bit tight or my shoulder's not right. But I think now the game's changing, and hopefully in another 10 years, players won't be suffering from these issues. But again, in my opinion, it's a small price I've had to pay for the career I've had.
And that last game you played, I think it was Carlisle, And I think you kind of retired a couple of weeks after that game because you'd missed the 16-17 season, and then obviously there was Drew Talbot that came back at that time, and you were there, and it was kind of a rescue mission to try and keep us in the Football League, really, wasn't it? But did you kind of realise after that Carlisle game that was it for you?
Oh, I'd realised 6 months before that I was finished. I was out for 18 months before I played another game, I think it was, and I remember after about 10 months, after the surgeon had done the 4th operation, he pretty much said, listen, this is it. It is not getting any better. The pain, I can cope with pain. I played with pain all my career. Fractured wrist. The pain wasn't a problem. It was the lack of range of motion in my shoulder, not being able to get my arm into the positions I needed it to go into to perform, and the effect that had on my performance overall, and then also as a kicker, the pain. So it wasn't just, oh, it's painful, but I can still do my job. It was painful and I can't do my job. So I remember the start of that season, Gary Caldwell said, how are you? And I'd just give it the old, yeah, I'm going to be fine. Another month would go by. Got to a point where we were struggling, and he said, listen, Tommy, I need you to play. And I sat in his office and said, I'm going to retire. And he said, can you not just give it a go for me? So I did. And the first game I kept a clean sheet. We beat Port Vale 2-0. And all the way through that game, I'm in the goal thinking, if anyone shoots to my left-hand side here, it's a goal. I can't dive to my left. I can't stretch my arm out. Got away with it in that game. Played the next couple of games, got away with it. And we played Newport County away, and I think we got beat 5. And I know for a fact 3 of the goals I would have saved if I'd have been fit, if I could get my arm where I needed to get to. Then we played Crewe, got beat 4 or 5, and I knew 2 of the goals I would have saved. And that was the point where I thought, yeah, I'm finished. I just need to tell the manager. But then Gary Caldwell got the sack and Jack came in. So obviously Jack's my friend, and he said the same to me. I went, can you just get out on the pitch for me? So I was like, right, yeah, I'll give it a go for you. Again, Lincoln, I conceded a goal I would have saved. And then the Carlisle, their equaliser in the last minute down to my left-hand side from like 35 yards. I should have just dropped my cap on it, but I couldn't get my arm out, so it went in. And it was after that game I'd made the decision in my mind already, but that's when I told Jack, I said, listen, I'm sorry, mate, but I can't do it anymore. I can't do what I need to be able to do to perform. And the pain on top of that, training every day, not be able to sleep at night, it's just not worth it anymore. And Jack at the time was brilliant. He was like, I understand completely. Whatever we can do, we'll help you. And the club were fantastic with me. I'll go on record in saying that the club did everything they could have done to make that transition as easy as possible, and I'm forever grateful for that.
It sounds like mentally it must have been a horrid time. You must have just wanted to not even going to training must have just been.
Yeah, the realisation after about 10 months that I'm finished, that was a difficult time. Making the decision and telling someone was the easy part, because I knew I'd agonised over it for 4 months. I knew I was making the right decision. I tried everything I could possibly do to get back to some sort of level, but I was 50% of the goalkeeper I was, because I couldn't do anything to my left-hand side, pretty much. So, yeah, the difficult time was after about 10 months when I knew that was it. I kept doing what I could do and seeing specialists and having procedures and following the protocols in the gym and trying to get somewhere. But ultimately, the decision was easy, but getting to the decision was the hard bit.
Well, on the lighter note, you had Testimonial, which is quite fun.
Yeah.
You played about, 6 minutes of it or something like that?
I played 6 minutes, yeah. But that, again, when I look back, forever grateful for the club allowing me to have that and, say bye to the fans properly, if you like, and giving my family the day out. And I look back on that day and think, what a great way to end a career that is. Listen, I've got no regrets. I played more games than the average professional footballer plays. Again, personal accolades and league titles, and shared some amazing times with the Chesterfield fans. And, it finished probably 10 years earlier than it might have done. But, again, that's the price you pay, I suppose. 2
league titles, final win, It's probably one of the most decorated players we've had, certainly in recent years. Anyway, so now you're on a career in coaching. So I think you had a spell at Wednesday, didn't you? And then you've ended up at United.
Yeah, I was at Wednesday for probably 18 months. I left just as the pandemic started, and it wasn't something when I played. If you'd have asked me, "Do you want to be a coach?" I'd have said, "Nah, not for me." But after retiring, I had a year where I didn't do much, and spoke to Jack quite a lot, and Matt Duke, who's now at Sheffield United, and he just said to me, well, why don't you come down and do the kids in the evening at Sheffield United? So I did, and I quite enjoyed it. And that's when Wednesday, the the job for head of academy goalkeeping came up, and I interviewed and I got the job, and then I started to develop a passion for it. Different sort of passion than playing the game, but I think to have a job that you've got a passion for, I think you're so fortunate, and to not pursue that and explore it would have been a real shame. So I'm at Sheffield United now, and I've been there a year and a half, and I love it. It's a real football environment, and developing players, and Jack's passion for developing players is unbelievable, and that rubs off on you, and it is probably the next best thing.
Yeah. And when I spoke to Sam Morsey, he said that he would say that you and Jack Lester were the two jokers in the squad, but you both had a very different type of humour, he said. I suppose you can't be like that nowadays, can you, now that you're the coach?
Not in front of the players. Not in front of the players. I'd be interested to know what sort of humour Morsey thinks I've got, actually. That'd be
what would you say? What's Jack's humour like? And then we'll just think what the opposite is.
I just remember I just used to hammer Jack for his gear, and I think the lads quite enjoyed that, with him being a senior member of the squad and whatnot. But I think, even that squad, there was a great camaraderie between the players and the togetherness, and we weren't all friends, which can be a misconception, but there was a respect as well. I think Sammy, Morsey and Jimmy would probably admit they weren't best of mates, but on the pitch, they would do anything to protect each other. And I think that shows in the performances they put together. So, we had a laugh. Of course we did. But I think we had that togetherness as well. And, I used to give Jack a bit of stick. I won't lie.
So we've come to the end. So you've spent, ages at Chesterfield, from 2008 to 2018, 17, 18. So, I mean, is there anything that is like top of the tree of your time at Chesterfield, or is there just too much to rank it in order?
I get asked all the time by Chesterfield fans, and the Wembley win, obviously, and the league titles. But I think the overriding feeling from me is like the support I got was, when I look back now, was unbelievable. Just walk out on the pitch and the fans singing your name, and even when I chucked a few in, especially early on, I got a bit of stick, don't get me wrong, but later on, I could feel that support, and I could feel how the fans appreciated my performances, and overall, that's a nice thing to look back on.
Yeah, and we did not know what to do when you cut your hair.
Yeah,
that was a massive shock.
That was down to an injury as well. I dislocated my collarbone in the JPT, I think it was, might have been Oldham. So I had this long, beautiful brown hair, but my right arm was in a sling for 12 weeks, so I couldn't do anything with it. So I had to go get it cut. So that's why I got the haircut, unfortunately.
Great. Well, on behalf of all Chesterfield fans, thanks very much for all those saves and everything over the years. It was amazing. During those times when we had you at one end of the pitch and Jack at the other, you couldn't go wrong, really. Yeah,
we did all right, and I appreciate it. Listen, I will always thank the Chesterfield fans and the club for everything they did for me in my career. And I think overall, we did all right.